Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Steelers Draft Talk. I'm Alan Saunders. That's Nick Farabaugh. We're talking the 2023 NFL Draft, and it was an extremely busy first day, both for the Pittsburgh Steelers and around the NFL. We're going to break down everything that happened yesterday, and then we're going to talk about what is on the table for the Steelers today as they hold that number 32 pick right at the beginning of the second round and are already fielding trade offers for that pick as quarterback Will Levis, the top target that fell out of the first round. Nick, a whole lot to get to. Let's try to get these people through their lunch hour. Also, if you have questions for Nick and I, drop it in the YouTube chat here, and we will get to it as we move forward with the second day of the NFL Draft. Nick, I guess just first your thoughts on yesterday's events, both with the Steelers and around the NFL.
Yeah, I thought it was fairly surprising, a lot of those picks. I think after fifth overall, when Devin Witherspoon went off the board, we saw some chaotic picks, especially right around where the Steelers picked. Jahmyr Gibbs at 12 was a real stunner that really allowed, in my opinion, I think that was the key catalyst that really allowed the Steelers to have a great board for where they could be comfortable moving up, which they did, or they could have been fine standing at 17 and getting a player they wanted, but they wanted that tackle. That was also something. The run on tackles was stark. It happened early. We talked about that yesterday. Was it going to be that there were only 4 tackles that everyone really liked, so they were going to go earlier, or would they drop a little further? It ended up being the first option where, Darnell Wright went off the board 10th overall. I mean, I don't know if we saw that coming. I think that was a little bit surprising, but that Skaronski came off right after him. Obviously, Paris Johnson went off the board at 6. And then so Broderick Jones was going to go off the board 15th overall, and the Steelers really, really wanted this tackle. I think, I don't think that they boxed themselves into a position, but I think they came into this draft saying, we need a tackle, and they trusted that they would be able to get that tackle at 14, far more than they did at 17. I think they were right. I think Broderick Jones was going to be a New York Jet if they did not trade up for him. So they end up with him. It's a good pick for them. They give up very minimal. And then after the Steelers pick too, I thought the board fell very nicely for them for today. Will Levis not off the board, Hendon Hooker not off the board, or if they want to stay pat, right? You have a bevy of talents at different positions that you can pick from. So lots of surprises. There's always is, but I thought yesterday was about as chaotic a first round as I can really remember in the NFL draft. And that's really kind of, I think, indicative of this draft. We've talked about how everybody's kind of very close to one another. There's not really a top group, so a lot of different teams are going to have different rankings, and I think that's what ended up happening yesterday.
Yeah, we talked yesterday. I specifically laid out this trade up to New England as one that I thought was very likely for the Steelers. I thought if they wanted to get a tackle in that first group that they had to go up to secure one, especially because of the Jets sitting there at 15. That's what they do. The Pats give a little hey, rather see this guy not in the AFC East discount, maybe. Steelers pay only a 4th round pick to move up those 3 spots. Not really I actually thought that move would cost more than it did for them. And so, I really have very little to say negatively about the way the Steelers approached the first round. Great aggressiveness by Omar Khan to move up, see the way the draft was falling, but then still not overpay to do so. I think they really threaded that needle quite neatly. Love the player. We talked about him pretty extensively yesterday, so you can find that video if you just scroll up one here on the channel at Pittsburgh Sports Live. But I love the player. I love his upside. I think he's a very good run blocker now that could become a very good pass blocker and has all the athletic and physical tools to do so. Let's talk about the way the rest of this draft falls, because a guy that a lot of people, including myself, thought would be an option for the Steelers at pick 17, Joey Porter Jr., still on the board at number 32, along with some other guys that I think people didn't think would fall. Mentioned Will Levis. He's obviously the big name for around the league, not an option for the Steelers, but guys that are more in the Steelers sphere, Notre Dame tight end Michael Mayer, Brian Branch, Alabama defensive back. Like, there are guys that were legitimate round 1 options, probably, second half of the round 1 options, if we're not talking about Levis, but legitimate round 1 options nonetheless that are there for the Steelers. Now, Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan have already sort of hung the for sale sign on pick 32. They now, with that trade to New England, don't have a pick between 80 and 241. I can't see that gap staying where it is. So do the Steelers love Joey Porter Jr. enough to stay at 32 and make him their pick? Or is this the trade down that we all saw coming when Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan first talked about it a few days ago?
Maybe I don't think that there is a player here personally that I would just say I can't miss. I think there's enough players to where I can move down enough spots and get a really good player. We talked about this yesterday when I talked to you about how I felt like there were only 10 true first-round players, but there was about 45 to 50 fringe dudes. I mean, that's the type of draft there is here. And you miss out on Joey Porter Jr. if you trade down. But you get Cam Smith. You get Keely Ringo. You get DJ Turner. You get Julius Brents. You get Tyreek Stevenson. I mean, that's 5 corner options that make complete sense at this spot too. I mean, there's so many guys, if they stick there, I think that there are great players to pick. I think, Brian Branch is a legitimate first-round talent. Joey Porter Jr., a legitimate first-round talent in terms of where they are right now. I look at the tight end board and I find that very intriguing. That's a very appealing option to me. If we're talking true BPA on the board, you might be looking at Michael Mayer as the BPA on the board right now.
Or Levis, probably. But I mean, he's obviously not an option for the Steelers. Yeah, I'm very interested in this because to me, the 2 positions where the best players that the Steelers could conceivably draft at this spot at 32, and the 3 best guys are Mayer, a tight end, and Porter and Branch defensive backs.
Yep.
And those are the deepest parts of this draft. Like there are good tight ends that could be had if they trade back 5, 10, 15 spots. And the same thing with defensive backs. I mean, guys like you mentioned Keely Ringo, you mentioned Cam Smith, Julius Brents, Tyreek Stevenson. Like there are 4 good corners that are going to go somewhere in the first part of the second day here that are maybe not quite as good as Porter, but certainly very good and very playable corners. Some of them might even be better fits for exactly what the Steelers need. Same thing at tight end, not just Mayer, but you have Darnell Washington, who's a guy that I think both of us really like sitting there from Georgia. This is a deep tight end, Luke Musgrave from Oregon State, and deeper into day 2, guys like Sam Laporta and Tucker Kraft. So, and another one we didn't mention yet, Osiris Torrance from Florida was another guy who was talked about at the back end of the first round. The Steelers have been connected to all these interior offensive linemen. They don't have an obvious need, but it sure seems like they were still looking at them. John Michael Schmitz, like those are guys that are available here, but also, I mean, Steve Avila, Cody Mock, like there's probably Joe Tippmann, like there's probably going to be guys later. So I don't know. To me, I'm with you. I think there's enough depth in this second round that the Steelers can pretty harmlessly trade down. The one thing is if you trade down and you miss on Joey Porter Jr. and he turns out to be an all-pro, probably going to have to wear that one for a while, considering who he is, where he came from. I don't know how much that matters, though. Like, I just don't know. I think if they can get a good enough price, they will still entertain trading this pick.
Yeah, I think they will. I mean, I know Joey Porter Jr., there's optics there. And, the optics of that, you pass on essentially a Steelers legacy player there and a player that fits your need just about perfectly. So it feels like, I mean, let's say this, if they stick at 32, I would bet 90% he's the pick. I just find that to be very hard to not see that happening. But yeah, they'd wear that a big time, because it's also going to put the corner they would then pick up against him and all of that. But listen, this is a really good corner class. And is the drop off from Joey Porter Jr. to Cam Smith that much? I'm not sure it is. So I think that you look
I might prefer Brent's. Like, I'm not saying I do, but there's things I like about Brent's more than what I like about Porter. Like
I mean, Porter,
there's lots of interesting corners.
Of the first round corners, Porter was the one that was like, okay, significant kind of questions about the hip flexibility to me. He's a little stiff. He's a little raw in a lot of his ways. He's physical and he's long and he's got great physical tools, but there are some significant questions there. So to me, I'm not sure if there's a huge gap there. I know everyone would like him, but I think some of that want is the fact that his name is Joey Porter Jr. I just, think that is very true. He's from Pittsburgh. He knows the Tomlins. He's Joey Porter's son, all of this. there's just a mystique around that. It was like Sky Moore last year, right? Everyone wanted Sky Moore. They ended up with Pickens anyways, taking it before Sky Moore. So there are always these semantics with it. But if they take Joey Porter Jr., it's a great pick at 32. This is great value for him. He is the best corner on the board. I don't think it's like crazy in terms of the gap, but I think he is the best corner on the board. So I think he would be your pick at 32. I think he's probably, in my opinion, of the players left, I think he's your best pure player on the board. I like him a little better than Brian Branch. I still am not sure about the Brian Branch fit with the Steelers. I think it's a little odd. He's kind of a huge version of Mike Hilton in a lot of ways, but slower.
It's like a Hilton Sutton hybrid. Like,
yeah,
but I'm not sure that is better, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think those guys in their respective lanes were more effective than one guy that was sort of half of one and half of the other would be in trying to split the difference.
Yeah, and so I think, they take Branch, they still have to take another corner too. I think that's the thing. You take Branch, you get your nickel guy. I think he's your starting nickel probably from day one, but who's going to be the outside corner that you take? Because you got to double down. They might double down anyways, but I just think it's easier to find quality nickel corners later in the draft than it is quality outside corners. So
especially
that's
if they can get another 4th round pick, because I think there's a big cluster of them there.
Exactly.
Travis Hodges Tomlinson, Riley Moss, Clark Phillips, like that's where those guys are going to go. Late 3rd round, early 4th round. Like they can pile them up right there.
They can, and I think that's something to look at. So I'm not sure if the fit of Branch is completely boom with the Steelers. As much as I think Joey Porter Jr.'s fit with the Steelers is great, I think that's a good fit for them. I think he's the type of player they don't really have in that secondary right now. I think he fits a lot of what they want. So I think that makes a lot of sense. But I also, there's the question of, are they going to take it from a position of strength, or are they going to take it from a position that doesn't have much depth? I think we haven't talked about that. What about linebacker? I think that we have to start to talk about that. The one guy, I don't think Drew Sanders is as likely as Trenton Simpson. I look at Trenton Simpson because he's a guy that played at all 3 levels. He was a pass rusher off the edge. He was a blitzer up the middle. He was a true inside linebacker. He was a guy that played Sam, Will, and Mike at times at Clemson, and then he played back at safety. So he's your true dime linebacker, a sub-package chess piece. That's what he is. He would be your coverage linebacker. You wanted to look for that coverage linebacker, that could be Trenton Simpson. So I think he could be a guy that could potentially be the pick at 32 or 49. It just depends. Jack Campbell already off the board kind of throws a loop for this linebacker group a little bit. I'm not sure.
I was all in on wait until 49 for linebacker, but Campbell being off the board from that top group, that also I would also include Day and Henley in addition to the guys that you mentioned in that group. But yeah, I'm with you that Trenton Simpson is the only one of those guys that I would consider at 32. Edge and defensive line, also 2 positions that kind of got picked over pretty heavily. Guys like Will McDonald, and Adike Uzoma from Kansas State, Mozzie Smith, all guys that I had in my big board for this pick, all gone. Relatively few guys at either of those positions that I would think the Steelers would be considering at 32.
Keon White's the big one at edge to me. They showed a lot of interest in him. He's a little bit of an interesting player, a little rawer, but he's a guy that has a relentless motor, could potentially fit that void. BJ Ojulari is still there. I like BJ Ojulari. We have no inkling that they have a single bit of interest in BJ Ojulari, but I like the player a lot.
He actually, so when I do my big board, and you can find it on the site at SteelersNow.com if you're still interested to break it all down, but I have like one code for like, okay, Steelers saw him at the Senior Bowl, and then another, like the guys that are underlined, they met with at the Combine, and then there's the guys that Tomlin or Khan or Weidel was at their pro day, and then there's the guys that came to Pittsburgh for the top 30 visits. And I'm pretty sure of all the guys in the top 3 rounds, BJ Ojulari was the only guy who checked 0 of those boxes. I love the player, but I just don't think they're interested.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible they are. We've seen it happen before. It's not something that they had shown no interest in. Juju Smith-Schuster, and he was the pick. I mean, it's possible. But there are other guys that are still there. Derek Hall from Auburn. Is a guy that you could get probably a little later that fits them very nicely. It's a deep edge group. I don't think we've talked about that enough. You have enough edge talent. Tuli,
Oh, there's lots of
Tuipulotu.
good edge guys like later in day two and then beyond. I just don't think there's one that jumps out to me for them at 32.
Yeah, I mean,
How about defensive line? I mean, Keanu Benton, Gervon Dexter, Siaka Ika. It feels like a little bit early for those guys, but with the way that the defensive lineman did go earlier than I thought. An option here for you? Not to me, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think Benton's an option here. I think Keanu Benton is a guy that in a trade back scenario makes a lot of sense for them. I feel like I think one of these first two picks will be an interior D lineman. I think they need one really bad. I think they've shown their faces that they want to get these trenches done, man. I think that's very clear. I think Benton's probably their A1. He just fits them so well. Jim Leonard's scheme is basically the college version of Mike Tomlin's scheme. So it's a plug and play, ready to go. Keanu Benton's a day one contributor that can play from 3 to nose. That's what they need right now. They need a guy that can play 3 in. If they can get a guy like that, I think that'll be huge for them. And I like Keanu Benton. A lot of untapped potential in there in the pass rush bag. Thought he was really good down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. The Steelers love themselves some guys that they see at the Senior Bowl too. So I like him a lot. Another edge guy we didn't even mention that I really wanted to kind of touch on a little bit. There's a lot of players at interior D line that you talk about that, are going to get pushed up the board, for example. That's like a Siaki Ika will get pushed up the board probably because of that. But I'll tell you who else at edge can really get pushed up the board as a result of this. Isaiah Foskey. I don't think we talked about him enough. He's another Senior Bowl guy. No one's really talked about him since then. He was supposed to be a first round pick. I think that could be a Steelers-y type of pick right there. Isaiah Foskey, maybe 49, but I look at 32 in the grand scheme of things. To me, it's either going to be Keanu Benton or Trenton Simpson or one of those DBs. That's kind of what I'm at. I just don't think they're going to dip into the tight end pool. I don't see it. I think it's very intriguing. I think it's a good option for them. But after they traded for Allen Robinson, I don't think it's as huge of a need. I think they could wait and use one of those day 3 picks because the tight end class is so absurdly deep and get a blocking tight end that could bring in competition for Zach Gentry.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's talk about pick 49 because obviously the Steelers have 2 here. We did talk about some of these guys in that process, but okay, assuming that the pick 32 looks like it is probably a defensive back in some way, in shape or form, whether that's at 32 or in a trade back. Where are we looking at 49 and who are the options there? I mean, to me, this is where linebacker really comes into play and also those defensive linemen we talked about. But there's also a bunch of interesting edge guys in this range as well. We talked about Ojulari, Keon White. You mentioned Foskey. I'll throw in Derek Hall from Auburn, Tuipulotu from USC. There's a bunch of guys here that could fit them on the edge, defensive line. And so, I mean, which direction do you think they go with 49? Is there an obvious choice? Also, those guards that we talked about probably fitting in this range too.
I mean, he can even throw in wide receiver at this point.
Yeah, Josh Downs, Cedric Tillman, Jalen Hyatt's still on the board. He
is.
Honestly could be one of the best players available for that 32 slot as well.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, though, you start to get into receiver if the guy is the right guy. So you open up the board completely here to me. You even throw in safety here if you get the right guy. If a Sidney Brown, a Christopher Smith, if you like a guy like Antonio Johnson, maybe falls there. That can be your nickel guy. So that's something to keep an eye on too. But I look at this and say, if we anticipate them going DB with the first pick, which I technically think they will, I think they'll go corner. I think it's probably the right way to go. I think they go interior D line here. I think, Keanu Benton, Gervon Dexter, Siaki Ika makes a lot of sense for this team. They might have to reach in this interior D line class. It might be a one of those spots where they have to be a little uncomfortable taking a player a little early in order to secure them. I think that might be it. I wouldn't love Ika at 49. You'd rather him at 80. But he's not going to make it there. It's just not enough guys. Maybe Adi Adibawore is a guy you look at out of Northwestern. freakish tester, kind of an in-out guy, plays edge, plays interior D-line. One of those guys, kind of to me, in a similar vein to what you might get in a Lucas Van Ness, but essentially at half the price. So that's possible. But I feel like the trenches are going to be your second pick. So I think that's where it's going to go, whether that's edge, D-line, interior O-line, even throw tight end in there, I guess, because Darnell Washington is an absolute butt kicker. So I look at the first pick, I say corner. So I think a realistic type of mock for your first two picks, Joey Porter Jr., you stick it at 32. That second pick, Keanu Benton. That seems very realistic to me as long as Benton falls to 49. If he doesn't, Gervon Dexter makes a lot of sense too. I think that there's just a lot of guys that make a lot of sense for the Steelers at interior D-line in this range. And I think that also at corner, there's a lot of guys there, but I think that they're going to really covet that cornerback because they need a young guy this year, in my opinion, to start to really learn from Patrick Peterson.
Yeah. So you mocked Keanu Benton, 49 to the Steelers in your 7-round Steelers mock. In my 3-round NFL mock, I had Jack Campbell going to them at 49. He's obviously already off the board and a part of a just mind-numbing Detroit Lions first round. Did you see where did PFF grade the Lions? I just want to know very quickly because that's about as bad of a first round as you can get. It
is an awful
from a value standpoint and taking a running back and an inside linebacker. But I think if Simpson falls to 49, he's a very realistic pick for them there. Probably, more likely than not to be gone already. But I think he's a good choice there. I also am not willing to rule out the guards. I just think they brought in Torrance, Schmitz, Avila, Mock, Zavala. All those guys came to Pittsburgh after that already signed Seumalo and Herbig. Like they knew they had guys, and they're still bringing those guys in. So I think that's still got to be on the table. I like Trenton Simpson, though. I think that would be, if I'm going to mock one here, but can't go wrong with Keanu Benton. He's a great fit for the Steelers as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, guard is a possibility. It just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense, but I just don't think we can rule it out.
I mean, it only makes sense if you're moving James Daniels to center. And I think that's kind of going to be something maybe that they breached. I don't know. But, I mean, you're only drafting a center. You're only drafting, to me, a guard if that is the plan. Because there is no opening at guard right now. Yeah. There straight up just isn't. James Daniels and Isaac Seumalo are good veteran guards. So if you are moving James Daniels to center, okay, I can get on board with that. Then you have But even then, I mean, you have enough quality depth to where I'm not going to panic there, right? Because if you're moving Daniels, well, Cole becomes a backup at that point. You still have Kevin Dotson. You have Nate Herbig. I mean, I get that they want maybe a guard. I just don't think it's a wise allocation of resources, given that they have a very big surplus at that position right now. And their two starters are under contract for 2 more seasons at their very least. James Daniels has 2 more years. Seumalo has 3. I don't know. I think if they take an interior O-lineman, it's going to be Avila or Schmitz. I think a center-capable guy makes a lot more sense than a guard guy that can only play guard.
I agree. Also, and this sort of segues into the other thing I want to talk about. The Steelers now, without a pick between 80 and 241, absolutely are going to make some trades to fill into that space. If they don't trade down from 32, let's talk about some of the other ways they can get some picks in there. One of them is obviously trading down for 49. You can do that, certainly. I like some players in that 50, 60 range that we haven't really talked about so much because they didn't really fit, the Steelers draft picks, but certainly is a possibility. But I think the idea of trading a Kevin Dotson to get back into that range makes a lot of sense. Maybe is trading a Mason Cole in there on the table as well. I don't know, but it seems like, God, they got to want another guard for a reason, right? I think that we have to consider those as options here.
Hey, the James Daniels rumors were a thing. I mean, they're dumb.
I can't see them trading James Daniels.
If they do,
it's see them trading Mason Cole If
Yeah,
they
I mean,
think he's a long-term answer at center and they think they can move Daniels over and they like what they have, that you can draft a guard and then let Herbig start for a year while the guy, young guy comes in behind him, or you draft a center like Schmitz who could walk in and play tomorrow. I mean, I don't
yeah,
know. It just seems like
it's a tough spot. And if you trade Daniels, it's a dumb move. I don't care who you
yeah,
draft.
they
It's a
can't.
dumb
I
move.
can't see them trading
Is
Daniels,
there,
but either Dotson. I mean, what do you think they would get for Dotson and Cole? Maybe like Cole to me should be a day 2 pick, maybe late in the second round. Dotson
yeah,
maybe like a fifth.
yeah.
That's where I'm
You
at?
could get that. You could get that for Dotson, a fifth round pick or something like that. I think that's a possibility. Outside of that, player trades, there's not really a lot of guys that make sense to trade. You're not trading really anyone else to me outside of Dotson or Cole potentially. There's no one really at tight end that's going to require any of that. The receiver depth chart is just not good enough to do anything there. Running back, you don't have enough guys, and there's no reason to trade one of your running backs. Safety, again, you're not really working from a position of strength there. You're trying to keep everyone that you have there. Linebacker, it's thin. Interior D-line, there's not enough guys there unless you want to move off, like, say, Montravius Adams, that could maybe require you a 6th-round pick or something like that. Edge, again, not enough guys
How about
there.
Kello Witherspoon?
Would be, but they're already thin at corner. Unless they saw enough of James Pierre to where they think he could fill in a void there. That's potentially where they can.
Sure, they're taking 2 in this draft class.
Yeah,
because if they take 2, then he could sort of become an extra part in some ways.
it's possible. I mean, possible.
He's also. How about this? He's the 4th biggest cap hit on the Steelers defense. Everybody talks about like, it's the most expensive defense in the NFL. Yeah, it is, because of 3 freaking guys. Nobody else makes more than $5 million. Like, I don't know. I could see that being a potential trade. Just there's some cap relief aspect to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, they could be if they get the right guys. I mean, if they get Joey Porter Jr., I think that becomes exponentially more likely because he's
for sure.
I mean, they're similar players. So I think that could happen. I don't know. I feel like the most likely is trading back from 32. I think if the board falls the wrong way at 49, I don't think that can be ruled out completely. The
last one I want to bring up, like they can trade a 2024 pick. Like they did this when they got Isaiah Loudermilk in the 5th round. They can just trade the 2024 4th for this year's 5th. Is usually about how that works if they can't find another way to get into that gap. But either way, I'll be extremely surprised if we go into day 3 with the Steelers only holding 2 picks. To me, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Listen, they need to fill out some depth positions of specialized roles. We talked about this kind of how they need a nickel. They still need a 3rd running back. I think that's something people don't understand. Benny Snell's not back. So they need they could use one.
Yeah.
So
clearly they're waiting to see if they get one before they make that decision.
I would agree. Fullback is technically still unfilled. They need another interior D lineman. They need a lot of depth needs. They probably could use another safety. They could use a lot of depth players. They could certainly use, even with Miles Boykin returning, they could use another outside receiver. They could use a quarterback. We talked about that. They could use a 3rd quarterback. In fact, in my mock, I had them taking one. So I mean, they have some kind of minuscule depth needs to where they probably would rather acquire some day 3 just to get some special teamers in there, get some quality depth guys that bring in camp competition. So to me, I think that's why they will move back probably, because that's just a huge gap, man. And the Steelers, I think, are a team that likes to fill out the bottom of that roster with guys they covet late in the day 3 process or middle of the day 3 process. So I can't see them going from 80 to 241 without picking. There are very many avenues to change that, but you should probably expect Omar Khan to be working the phones, whether that's a trade at 32 or whatever it may be. That's just a Steelers thing. That's a Mike Tomlin thing, I think, to me, because the more picks you get, the more it fosters competition.
Yep, I agree. Last thing I want to do before we wrap things up here ahead of the second day of the NFL draft is to just do a little bit of this right here. So NFL Mock Draft Database, which is the site that we have talked about a lot on this channel, and I write a lot about on the site. It aggregates all mock drafts from around the country, over 1,000 mock drafts in their final analysis, and 5th place in the NFL Mock Draft Database in accuracy in the first round. Alan Saunders, SteelersNow.com. I got a 24.76% success rate. They grade based on getting, you get so many points for the team, so many points for the player, and so many points for the position. I'll take it, Nick. I'll take it. 5th place out of over 1,000. Yeah, I think we did okay. Our listeners and readers at SteelersNow.com should be well informed about the 2023 NFL Draft.
Hey, you did a pretty good job on that. And listen, no one could have saw coming some of the picks that
no, I did not have Jahmyr Gibbs going to the Lions. That would have been the one to have, but I think we did pretty well. I think our draft coverage in general has done a very good job of keeping you all informed. I hope you love that. I promised I would get to some questions, but we didn't get any. So I guess you all just have nothing to add, and that's fine. We'll do this again. I don't know. Tomorrow, maybe, if we can make it work. Draft schedule on day 3 is a little hectic. If not, we will recap at the end of day 3, and we'll get back to you. Anything else before we wrap it up?
No, I think that's all. I think we touched on it all, and I think the day 2 should be just as entertaining as day 1 for the Steelers. This is going to be a very fun day.
I think we're going to be talking about some more wheeling and dealing from Omar. So I'm excited to get down to the South Side and cover all that. He's Nick Farabaugh. I'm Alan Saunders. Check out all the work at SteelersNow.com. Until the next time, enjoy following the rest of the NFL Draft.